Hello, everyone. My name is Magdalena Abrego. I'm an assistant director with Berkeley's Office of Alumni Affairs. Thank you all for being here today. I'm excited to begin what I hope to be the first installment of a series, DIY Home Studio Tips. As musicians, voice actors, podcasters, and other creatives continue to transition to at-home work, I find this topic grows in relevance by the day. So for today, we will have a presentation from our guest alumnus, Anthony Schultz. Now, before we get started, I want to encourage you all to check out some previous webinars online on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Berkeley Alumni. We've been super busy presenting a lot of virtual events during the pandemic, and they're all super relevant to everyone's professional development concerns in this time. So I really encourage you to check those out. And to learn more about upcoming webinars, I encourage you to check out our newsletter, which includes a comprehensive guide to all of our events. And if you don't receive a Berkeley alumni newsletter currently, but you would like to, write to us at alumniaffairs@berkeley.edu, and we'll make sure to update your contact info. So I'm really pleased to introduce Anthony Schultz today. I met Anthony through the Berkeley Boston Alumni Volunteer Group, which I oversee. Again, if you are a Berkeley alum living in the Boston area and that sounds interesting to you and you'd like to learn more about what our volunteer group does, please write to me at mabrego@berkeley.edu. I'll include all of this in the chat. This is a lot of links and email addresses and things like that. So if you want to reach out to us, I'll include that contact info in the chat. But in any case, Tony has been an audio engineer, music producer, and composer for more than 30 years as owner and operator of Big T Productions in Boston, Massachusetts. He's been an instructor of music production for Berkeley Online since 2016. He has a bachelor's of music degree in music production and engineering from Berklee College of Music. He served 3 consecutive 2-year terms as the chair of the Boston section of the Audio Engineering Society, 2 2-year terms as the VP of the Eastern region of the US, Canada, and currently serves as the chair of regions and sections for AES since 2016, overseeing all pro and student AES sections worldwide. So he's got a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge in this sector. So I'm super excited to hear what he has to say about recording vocals at home. You can learn more about Anthony at bigtproductions.com, but for now, I'll hand things off to Tony. Take it away.
Cool. Thank you. All right, so are you seeing my PowerPoint at all?
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right, good. Well, yeah, today, thanks for joining us today. So just an overview today about what I'll be covering. You know, like Magdalena said, I graduated from Berkeley in '88 from MP&E, and I started my studio pretty soon out of Berkeley. So I'm very familiar with home recording. This is the first incarnation of Big T Productions on my Haviland Street bedroom. So this was, you know, before recording at home was a thing. And so I'm going to cover some of the elements of, you know, just the elements of a small recording setup and talk about some of the peripherals, and then talk a little bit about kind of some things that will help you record at home now that we've been kind of doing this anyway, but now this year it's been kind of accelerated the need for doing that. So I started about 6 months after graduating from Berkeley. I decided to, you know, I had to figure out what I was going to do, and decided not to go to New York as I thought I might do, and just kind of stay in Boston and start my own studio, just kind of start off slow and hopefully prepare myself for maybe going to New York or someplace later, which never happened. So I was working out of my apartment for a number of years. This was like a 4-track with a 6-channel mixer, and then it kind of blossomed into a multi-track reel-to-reel and some keyboards and patch bays and things in that same bedroom several years later. So I worked out of my apartment for about 6 years full time. And when I moved, my neighbors were probably happy to see me go. So did a lot of work. At the time, I did a lot of rap. Before hip hop was a thing, it was just called rap, and I would record a lot of vocals. in this environment. So I did have to put up with a lot of the things that many people are putting up with now, with regarding to, you know, disturbing neighbors, getting a decent sound and things like that. So that's just kind of wanted to kind of show you where my roots were, which have changed a bit over the years. I moved in 95. I attempted to move into a large space, which I ended up doing and went in over my head financially. That was a 5-year growth. So that was the original space, and that's what it kind of became after thousands and thousands of dollars of construction and wiring. I was there for 5 years, and then we, you know, in that time we had a lot of events to try to boost the business up and things like that. Then I moved to where I'm at now in 2000 with the gear that I had, and then I kind of grew and grew until this is what I'm looking like now. So, you know, 31 years in the business, and that's kind of where I'm at this point from that initial startup. So, just going to kind of show you a basic recording setup. This is kind of what, you know, I teach for Berkeley Online. I also teach kind of independently, and I find that, you know, this is really what people are using majority of the time when they're at home. So you have some kind of computer, could be a laptop or desktop computer. But the thing that I find that a lot of students and other, you know, clients that are starting to do a little bit more work at home, they kind of don't know as much about the audio interface. So this audio interface is really, I'll be featuring this in a few slides. But I want to talk about the interface because this is really the heart of the home studio. You know, the computer is your tape machine of sorts. You know, it has all the apps and stuff, but this interface is really where people have the most confusion, I think. So the interface is used to, you know, plug mics in, plug line inputs in, and you're either going to be monitoring with headphones, or if you're, you know, able to play with speakers, um, that can connect to the audio interface. When you're recording, however, you can't use the speakers anyway if it's in the same room. So a lot of times the speakers are turned off while you're recording, but that's just a basic setup with a 2-channel audio interface. Gives you up to 2 channels at one time, and you connect it via most likely USB to the computer. So that's what most of my students are using. And then on the computer, we have some kind of software. That's kind of what it looks like in a nutshell. We've got a little interface with speakers and a mic and headphones. So that's kind of the basic setup of what I'm going to be focusing on today. I'm not going to be covering software today. That's a whole other thing, but I wanted to just point out there's a really cool free app called Audacity, and the website's listed there. It's audacityteam.org. It's a pretty amazing app for being free. It's a great recording app. It's not that great for signal processing just because it's destructive and you have to commit to things, but it's really great for recording and editing. So I recommend that, you know, for anyone that doesn't have a software app yet, they can do that. Otherwise, you know, there's plenty of other apps. Like I said, I won't be talking about that. That might be another webinar at some point, just discussing different recording applications, but that's a whole can of worms there. But Audacity is a great way to start, and it's free, and it'll work on both Mac and PC. Okay, so audio interfaces. This is how we're going to get signal into our computer. What does an audio interface do? It mainly acts as an audio converter. So we're taking analog signals, being our mic or line levels, capturing that, and then the audio interface processes that information and converts it to binary code, so it gets recorded in the computer. So it serves as an audio converter, and then it also gives us level control so that we can adjust the incoming signal into the computer. We can adjust how we monitor it, whether it's the speakers or the headphones. Just gives us a lot of control over the input and outputs of the computer via this box. This is only a 2-channel interface we're looking at, but they come in much larger configurations, you know, and so does the price tag goes up as well. But, you know, you can grow into that and start with something small and just be able to get, it's not even about quality. It's just the number of inputs is really all it is, because the quality is pretty consistent among many of these interfaces. So the one thing I like to point out when people haven't been familiar with audio interfaces is why can't I just use my computer? My computer has an input, my computer has an output. Well, there's a couple of major things why. The built-in input and output of your computer can't handle the signal that we need, you know, without distortion. You're going to hear it louder, and your computer has a certain limitation. So what you're feeding it and what you're listening back from, it's not able to handle the levels that we typically use. the computer can't handle recording multiple inputs at once. That's what the interface can do. You know, if you have a 4-input interface, 8-input interface, that's what allows us for the multiple inputs. So that's a main thing. If you're recording more than one input, you know, if you have a USB mic, that's fine for one channel, but the minute you want to record more than one, like, you know, 2 microphones capturing a stereo signal, you can't do that. So that's a hindrance in some cases. The computer connections are not compatible with your microphone. You know, we can't plug an XLR cable directly into the computer. So that is why an interface is helpful. And also, if we're using condenser mics, which I'll talk about in a second, condenser mics require a 48-volt power supply called phantom power, and the computer can't supply that. So therefore, you can't use condenser mics directly into the computer. So those are just some things that are why we would want to have even a small interface. So here's a very popular one. A lot of the students are getting this. This is a Scarlett by Focusrite. It's about $160. And what we have here is we have 2 combi jacks. Let me see if I can get this to show some of the connections here. I guess it's not. There we go. So we have 2 combi jacks, which allow us to plug in mic or line inputs. Each of those inputs has input control for gain. We have a headphone jack in the front. We have a headphone control independent of the master out, which this big knob would feed the left and right outputs, which would be fed to speakers if you're using speakers. And that would be on the back. You have the 2 left and right outputs, which if you did have speakers could be used for that. So that's just a basic configuration. And most interfaces that are small like that are, you know, they're portable and very functional, but that's for a 2-channel input. So microphones, this is where I want to talk a little bit about, you know, some of you might be already familiar with using microphones and such, but, you know, there's kind of like this, I don't know, this, you know, misunderstanding that all microphones are going to be expensive. There are some cheaper microphones that are better than having no microphones. So I'm going to give you a couple examples just to kind of maybe get you started if you're looking to get something affordable to start. There are some other ones. So the main thing is that you understand there's 2 different types of microphones, 2 different categories, and that's based on how they pick up the sound. Dynamic mics are electromagnetic. So there's a magnet involved in the conversion of the audio from acoustic to electrical energy. So dynamic mics they don't need phantom power, and they're typically not as sensitive as condenser mics. So I'll go over a few, but these are just picturing some of the ones that are going to be shown coming up. Dynamic mics are good for things that you don't want to pick up noise around it. Like for instance, I'm using this microphone here at the top. I'm actually using that right now. It's called a Shure SM7. It's not going to pick up outside noise as much, whereas some of the condenser mics are very sensitive and they're picking up more harmonic content. So, you know, you may want to have a dynamic mic for speaking, like for meetings and some vocals, and then other kind of more sensitive mics when you have a more sensitive acoustic recording. Something to consider is when you're looking at microphones is what is the polar pattern? And a polar pattern is where does the mic listen from? The most common is the cardioid pattern, which is shown on the right. That's just usually the standard pattern that if a mic has one pattern, that's probably what it is. Then there's also the omni pattern, which is not as common, but is a different type of pattern, which will pick up equally on all sides of the mic. That's typically used for, you know, a communication mic in the studio or room sound, things like that. But not so much for things that you want to have directional pickup, like an amp or a snare drum or something, or even a vocal. Unless you have people around the mic singing like a gang vocal, you probably aren't using an omni pattern. Bidirectional is very kind of misunderstood, and I want to tell you something that's really good about the bidirectional mic in the home environment. So with a bidirectional mic, it picks up, you can see it's also called figure 8, and it picks up on either side equally. However, if something enters the microphone from both sides, let's say there's a fan noise or, you know, air conditioner or some kind of ambient noise in the room, because that sound is hitting both sides of the diaphragm, the front and the back, one is positive and one is negative. So what happens with anything that gets picked up equally on both sides at the same time, it's going to cancel out. And it may not be 100% cancellation, but I'm telling you, this is a great thing to have in a noisy environment, like a home recording. This saved me so much over the years in just eliminating a lot of noise from the recording, both not necessarily just in my apartment, but when I went to that Kingston Street studio, I was in the heart of Chinatown. So it was just traffic noise. They were doing the big dig. There was just so much stuff. And that's not going to be eliminated, but it can be cut down immensely. We had a bunch of sewing machines up above us and they were vibrating. And so, I did have a ceiling on my ISO booth, but we could still hear some things. And using a bidirectional pattern will kind of close off the sound of the room and give you a much cleaner signal. So you just want to be aware of that because that doesn't come on all microphones. I'm going to show you some that do and are probably worth thinking about. So we're also talking about, how do we mic something? There's a couple ways I want to show you just that are, the basics of setting up a mic. If you have one mic, it's basically just a mono source. And what we're looking at here, the woman playing the violin is it's a condenser mic she's using, and I placed it kind of above her. And that's where the sound, one of the areas that is going to be captured for the sound. So it doesn't create a stereo image, but it's really good when you're trying to place an instrument within the stereo field. It's really easy to place it because it's got one source and you can pan it how you want, and it typically works really well with other instruments. It doesn't have any width if you're using it by itself, so probably not great for just like a solo performance like this violinist was playing a solo piece, and that's probably not the greatest. It doesn't sound bad, it just doesn't have width, that you may want for a certain solo recording. And I'm going to be using the same microphones for each of these three examples. So this is what you're looking at is called a Shure SM81. I don't have a picture of it in the following slides, but it's probably about $350 for that. So I'm not going to really be talking about some of the more expensive mics, even though that's not really considered expensive, but I'm going to try to focus on some cheaper mics than that just to get you started. But that's called an SM81. My favorite, really, when I'm doing something and I want to have a stereo, width, is called the XY or Coincident Pair configuration. So this gives you a really good stereo image, and it's really easy to use in any environment. So if you have a small room, it picks up surprisingly well. I use this on my guitar amp, and you wouldn't think that, I have a Mesa Boogie with one speaker, and you wouldn't think that having an instrument with one speaker could be captured in a kind of a stereo width kind of way, but it totally is amazing. Like, I use this technique in about 8 inches from my amp, gives me a nice wide sound. I can tighten it up towards the middle if I want to, but I can also widen it in any way that I want. So it's really helpful for that. And also acoustic guitar. It's great for acoustic guitar. You put that a few inches from the sound hole, and it just gives you such an amazing width. And I learned this actually from Bruce Swedien, who was Michael Jackson's engineer. And, as a member of AES, I have a lot of opportunities to meet people and talk with people over the years. And I had a great one-on-one with Bruce for a little bit. And it's mind-blowing how one tip from somebody like that can change your life, and this was just something I just didn't do it. I usually did a close mic and a distant mic on an amp, wasn't happy with it and just did it anyway, and that's how I'd used mics before. But now I just almost always use this as well as a direct input from the guitar. So this is my favorite. This is definitely by far the one I use the most when I'm trying to capture something in a stereo configuration. So, all right. And the last one, and there's several more, but these are the basic ones when you're going to use it at home. I focused on accessibility to something you could do at home. So this is called a spaced pair. This gives typically a wider stereo image because the mics are farther apart. You're kind of placing them on the edges of your sound field. However, you have to be careful in a smaller environment. The movement of the musician, and I didn't really think about this until it actually happened during my recording. The woman as she was playing was kind of swaying left to right, just movement of a normal violin player. And in the recording, I'm actually hearing a movement from left to right. So the imaging was kind of moving, which maybe you want that, or maybe you don't. So I used to use this space pair when I record choirs and any kind of performances in like a church setting, where you have a big kind of open room, and it's either a orchestral recording, like an ensemble, or a choir, and I would just use two mics, like called live to 2-track. I used to have these two mics really far apart, thinking that that was going to make a great stereo image. And it did work for the most part. It's just that I'm getting reflections off the sidewalls that kind of create things that I'm not really liking as much as if I put these two mics in an XY pattern, like just, I can't really block the aisle in the middle of the church, but a little off to the side on the aisle, which is more centrally located. And the XY pattern has always been better since I've started using it. So I just want to, point that out, that XY is preferable. Space pair will give you, more coverage. So let's say you have a few people, playing, and maybe a quartet or duo, and you want to kind of just capture them both equally. That might be something you would work on. And this doesn't work as well in a small environment though, but it as long as they're stationary, that should be okay. So just, you can move the mics, depending on what you're hearing, but those are just the three options that I wanted to point out using two microphones. So you would have to have a pair in order to do that. So there's two categories of condenser mics. There's large diaphragm and small diaphragm. So here's some examples, some really cheap microphones that I don't have these, but as far as the price, you really can't beat a microphone for $60. But I would the reason why I have the C1 here for 60 is that I'm looking at the C3, and for another $18, you can actually get some switches on the microphone, which we see here. The first switch being a low cut switch. So that allows you to kind of engage that when something is too thick. As you get closer to a microphone, let's say a narration, somebody being close to the mic, it's going to boost the low end. So right now I'm a few inches from my microphone, and if I get closer to the mic, you'll probably hear it get thicker in addition to louder. It gets a little thicker when you get closer. So if you want to offset that thickness with that narration, or maybe a microphone that's close to an amp that's a little too thick because of the proximity, it's called proximity effect when it does that, you can notch that down. This mic also has a attenuation switch. So if there's a loud sound source, you can flip the switch and go down 10 or 20 dB depending on the microphone, which is very helpful for a loud sound source. And then on the other side of that, we see that we have three polar patterns. So this microphone for $78 would give you the ability to use it in bidirectional, which would cancel out some of the noise in your space. So it's that mic is, even if it's halfway decent, would be worth $78 just for those switching capabilities, and definitely worth an extra $18 over the C1, because this is not able to, this is just a standard cardioid pattern, and that's all you get, which is, very common, but I like to use bidirectional more often now, just because I know that that's going to give me some cancellation of outside noises and stuff. Here's a couple more large diaphragms. Price goes up a little bit. We're getting into the Audio-Technica AT2020. It's cardioid. There's no switches on it. It is what it is, but it's a good mic, $99. And then the AKG P420, which is $179, and it has the switches that I mentioned before. So the $78 Behringer, has the same capabilities. Obviously, it's probably going to give you a better sound. And the thing to keep in mind about microphones is that these things last forever. As long as you don't drop them or throw them or whatever, they last a long time. So this investment is, something that makes you, less frustrated by having good tools like this. And these are affordable mics compared to some of the other mics that you might come across in the higher range. So we have some small diaphragm condenser mics, and these are used, usually you buy these in a pair. These C2s, the Behringer C2s, is a matched pair for $70. And it does have the low cut and attenuation switch on it, which is amazing. For $70, you can get do a stereo pair, do an XY pair. So you can't go wrong with that. For a little bit more, you can look at maybe considering the Rode M5. It's $199 for the pair, and that's a good bargain as well. So something to think about, depending on what you're trying to do. I mean, all of these are definitely decent enough to, I mean, for $70, you can't go wrong, Then the dynamic mics, these are the ones that don't pick up as well, but they're very durable microphones, and they're very common. I mean, you might have probably seen these SM57, SM58 mics. So the SM57 has been around for years, and they haven't changed these for decades. But the SM57 would be good for snare drums, good for guitar amps, things that are really loud. It can withstand sound pressure levels, and it's really the only mic that you can buy and use it as a hammer to build your studio with, and then use it on your snare drum as soon as the studio's built. It's that durable that you could probably do that. So, and the 58 is the same mic essentially, but it has a ball end, which is more useful for vocalists. It has a little windscreen built into that end, and so it kind of protects it from moisture when you're singing into a mic. It protects you a little bit from that. So these are only $89. They used to be, $99. Sometimes you can get it for $79. Very useful, but they're just not sensitive. So these are great for clubs, and great for like a loud rap vocal or something. But it's not going to be great for an acoustic guitar, and certain nuances of a vocal, it won't capture that as well. But they're very durable mics, and definitely worth having a few around. So the one that I'm really digging, and I'm using it right now, is the SM7. This one is more expensive. It's, I held off for a long time getting one, but I ended up buying two in January, and I'm glad I did, because I've been using them all the time. I have one at home and I have one at the studio here, and I use them for these types of things and for all my lessons and everything. So it's a dynamic mic, so it's fairly quiet. It's a little bit more expensive. It's $400, but it's, like I said, you'll use it a long time. The thing that I like about this mic, in addition to, just it's a very popular mic. I mean, you've probably seen it when people do podcasts, sports guys, or when they do the sports radio and they show the videos of that. This is kind of what they're using. But the thing about this mic is it comes with its own windscreen. This is a built-on windscreen and its own kind of assembly here for the mic. You actually don't plug the mic into the mic. You plug the mic into that connector right here. So this is where you plug the mic into it. So it's kind of unique in that you're plugging into something that has a wire to the microphone. And one benefit of this is the SM7 has a low cut switch, which is great because not many dynamic mics have the ability to cut the low end. So this is really good if there's too much low end, because you're typically using it for voiceovers and some certain vocal. A lot of people use this vocal. I mean, Michael Jackson used this vocal mic a lot. So it's definitely useful for singing, definitely for rap, definitely for narration, audiobooks, podcasts, that kind of thing. So for $400, it's, I mean, it is what it is. It's just, it's a very utility mic, and you'll use it for a long time. Okay, so headphones. We're gonna probably use headphones a lot at home because people don't want to hear our music all the time, especially at night. But I just want to show you, I have two different types of headphones that I use very commonly. So the on the right, the Sennheisers, these are the Sennheiser HD 280s. These are what's called closed back headphones. These are really tight to the ear, and I use these while I'm recording in the recording room. Anytime you have a microphone open and you're singing or playing, these are the headphones I use for that, because they don't bleed into the microphone. They really are, they seal the sound a little bit. You got to kind of keep the level under control, but it doesn't bleed into the microphone nearly as much. And these are $100, and I have 5 or 6 pairs of these for the musicians when they're recording. I'm not a big fan of wearing these types of headphones for long periods of time if I don't need to record. So when I do editing and mixing on the computer, I use my AKG K240s, which are they used to be $100 and now they're down to $70. They have a Mark II version, which is about $140 or something. But I still, I'm actually going to be buying maybe 2 more of these just for, having something at home, having something here, instead of having to always be keeping it in my bag. It's getting really ratty because I use it all the time. But it's a lot easier to keep on for long periods of time when you're doing editing and mixing. It's more comfortable, but it doesn't retain the sound within the headphone nearly as much. But if you're not recording with a mic, it doesn't matter. So you know, it's just for comfort, and I'm used to how they sound, you know, the frequency response, I'm used to that. So it's been you know, a very, you know, I mean, even like I said, I'm going to probably buy another 1 or 2 of these because mine are getting really ratty. So so there's, you know, different uses for that. What you want to stay away from with headphones is using a headphone that influences the music too much. I mean, they all do to some extent. But for instance, I also have those Bose noise canceling headphones, which are great for being on the airplane, but they're not great for mixing because it has so much low end boost to make the sound, you know, enhances, you know, the sound of the listening environment. But it's hard to make decisions when you have those kind of headphones because they're creating so much boost to some frequencies that it's hard to know what you're really, you know, getting from that. So I stay away from those for any audio things other than using it on the plane because it's great for noise cancellation. That's the main thing. But I tried it once and I wasn't able to mix anything on that. So these are my 2 favorites here. And then you might be thinking about monitors, and monitors don't always have to be expensive, and you know, you may not even, you know, need them often, but I think it's good to be able to have a pair of monitors that you can listen to on occasion if you're able to, you know, where you are. And there's a couple, these 2 are just 2 examples of a pair of monitors, powered monitors, which means you know, it has the power amp in it. So we have a pair, 2 different models here that are $100 a pair. You know, and they're decent. They're small. You know, they're just a few inches. The driver's only a few inches. They are 2-way speakers, so that helps. But the thing that's unique about these, and I want to show you this because this is where people kind of, when they buy these and they look at the back and they don't know how to connect them. So these are very unique in that only one of these speakers, both of these pairs, one of the speakers is the only one you plug into the power. That's the only one that has the amp in it. And then you plug both channels into the speaker, and then you take the black and red terminals here and you use traditional speaker wire to connect the second one to the main one. So just that's really the only difference with these, is that it only has one power amp that covers 2 channels. So that's why you buy them as a pair, because one of them is the power amp loaded and then the other one connects to it from the terminals here. So these are both the same kind of connection, but for $100, it's, you know, you can't really beat that. And they're small and they're good for, you know, good for students or good for small situations where you don't really have a lot of space to set up a powered monitor. They're very, you know, kind of useful, but, you know, not taking up a lot of room. For a little bit more, you know, kind of like the next level, we're talking about buying speakers each, you know, so you want to pay attention when you're looking at pricing. Is this a pair? Like the ones I just showed you were $100 for the pair, whereas these, you know, moving up a little bit, this is $199 each or $320 each. So, you know, when you're looking at these, you're like, well, and I'm probably not doing it justice regarding the you know, the size of them. One has got a 5-inch driver and one has a 6.5-inch driver. So they're probably not sized proportionally to what they are. But you know, you would look at this and go, okay, well, this one's a lot more. Why is that more money? And so I put in this case, I put in the wattage, which one is 70 watts and one is 95 watts. So, you know, that's what you're going to be looking at in addition to the small size differential and the kind of large price differential. It just gives you more power, slightly bigger driver, a bit more power, and, you know, maybe more than you need. So that's once you get past this 200 and 300 each price range, then you're talking, you know, then there's a whole level of and then the next level would be like $500 to $800 each. So that's like the next level, and it gets pretty pricey at that point. But, you know, these speakers are, you know, you use them every day. So in my case, I have 2 pairs of powered monitors. I have Mackeys and I have some vocals, as you saw in the picture. Those, you know, you use them every day, and I use 2 different pairs, and I kind of go back and forth on occasion to kind of A/B what I'm listening to. And I think the ones I have now, both pairs are probably about $800 each. You know, so $1,600, between $1,200 and $1,600 a pair. Once you get up to, you know, I wouldn't call that high end either. It's just, pro, low end of the pro market. And I'd love to have an awesome pair of speakers, but I also know that, people listen in normal speakers. So I kind of don't overreach too much and have a great pair of speakers that doesn't sound like that when people listen to it. So you just got to make sure that what you're using is something that, sounds right when you listen in other environments. And so these are the backside of these speakers. So you can see that each one of these speakers will have a power supply, but what it also has too is it has functionality with regards to the EQ. So this is related to, are you using these speakers up against a wall? Are you, it gives you some controls with regard to level. So there's a level knob which you can control the gain of the speaker when you feed it signal, like, how loud will the speaker be, and you pretty much keep that the same thing, and then you control the gain with your interface. But the EQ part of it is meant to kind of, like a low cut on a mic. This gives you a low cut on a speaker, because if you have this up against the wall, this little port that's on the backside, that's usually where some of the low end comes out. The excess low end, there is low end coming out of the front, but this is the negative information that comes out slightly later, and it enhances the low end response of the speaker. So if that low end response is hitting up against a wall surface, it's going to enhance it, and it might sound good, but you also, you want to have a pretty flat response to what you're expecting it to sound like when you're done with it. So although it might enhance the low end up against the wall, you kind of want to make sure that you're listening properly to it. So those just give you some added features with that at that kind of slightly higher price range. All right, so we've got, all these different things we're using. We've got a computer, we've got our interface, we got our microphones. Now, being trapped at home, and just, people that work, have been, practicing their instrument at home, just, even pre-pandemic, you may not have actually kind of gone around your house and tried to figure out what your rooms sound like. So this is just, considering, that you have various rooms in your house. Some of them may sound good and some of them may not, but until you try it, you may not know. So we've got, different size rooms. We've got, carpets and drapes and couches, and some rooms are better than others. You want to just keep in mind that the closer the mic is to the sound source, the less influence the room will have on that recording. So if you place the mic further away, the room's going to influence the mic. You may want that, and you may not want that. That's what having multiple mics at different distances may do, but then you start to get, more of a recording studio kind of situation. Just be aware that the closer you are to the mic will give you more direct sound and less of the room sound. So that's up to you as far as what do you think you want to do. If the room sounds great and you want to capture it with a little bit of room sound, then you just push the mic a little bit further back, bring up the gain on the recording, and just once you figure out what the sweet spot is in your recording space, you'll be able to use that more than just once. So it's good to become familiar with that. Couple things to be aware of. These terms may make sense to you, but we have reflection, which is when things bounce off. We have absorption, and then we have something called diffusion, which is kind of scattering the sounds around so they don't build up in any one location. So those are just kind of acoustic terms, but we're able to kind of apply that in the home. One is, recording, let's say, a saxophone solo in your walk-in closet. The dampening of the clothes it makes an excellent room for many voiceovers, certain acoustic instruments, like loud horns and stuff like that. It just really helps to have something like that to deaden in the home environment when you don't have an actual dedicated room for recording. So that would help with absorption. If you're in a kind of a living room type of area and you've got a big bookcase, that actually is helpful for diffusion, where you have a little bit of liveliness. Maybe you have like this animal skin rug that will help absorb the information or not. But the bookcases are very good, with various books and knickknacks on the shelf is actually acting as a diffuser. So when the sound hits that, It does have some reflective properties. You know, sometimes books are a little bit absorptive in some ways, but you know, the angles of all these books and shelves will breaking up the signal, and you give you this, you know, like dispersion within the room, which can kind of help, you know, cause the waves to break up a little bit and not be so reflective into your microphones. So those are home things that kind of help you to do that. So in order to get to know your own space, what you can do, this is something we don't really think about, but I did this for a course that I designed over the summer. All you need to do is take a speaker and a microphone, and then have a particular, you know, a sound source that is free of reverb or any processing to play through the speaker. And what you do is just, you know, let's say you have Audacity and you just record this dry sound source in a particular room. You want to keep the same level and the same distance away, and then you go into another room, and then you go into another room, and you go into another room. So you can test various rooms in your house. You can test it, you know, in the bathroom, in a bedroom, in a basement, in a garage. And then if you just record all these sources, you're playing the same sound source in different rooms, and then you just line those up in the various tracks of Audacity, and you can A/B these different rooms and listen to how each room sounds different. And maybe some rooms surprisingly will be better than others, and you might realize that, wow, I didn't even know if I went into this, the hallway sounds the best, or this third bedroom sounds best, or whatever. So, you know, in this case, this is my recording room in the studio, and it's a little, it's, you know, it's not completely reflective. There's panels and you know, carpet on the platform there, but it's got some brick, so there's a little bit of reflective properties. But the combination of that actually makes it a really good, you know, really good sounding room. So, you know, just because there is some hard surfaces, it's not a bad thing. As long as, you know, all the surfaces aren't hard, you might be okay. So just, you know, I invite you to try that out, and just kind of get familiar with it. You want to retain the same distance and the same level, so that you can kind of hear how lively a room is compared to another one. You want to keep some consistency with that recording, and just A/B it, and then you're going to have a better picture as to what rooms might be better suited for recording in your home. There's panels, there's these little things in the corners. This right here, this little orange panel is it's a piece, you know, the pipe, the plastic tubing, PVC. It's a large PVC pipe that's cut in half, and then there's foam put over the outside, and then fabric stretched around it and stapled on the inside of the PVC pipe. So you put those in the corners, and that'll cut some of your low end. Low end tends to build up very badly in corners. So if you kind of can put some absorptive materials in the corners, anything, it could be, you know, just hang something, or, you know, even drapes work really well. If drapes are up against the wall, that's very helpful. So anything that's absorptive in certain areas, like this blue panel is in the back of the control room, and then this orange thing is in the corners of the front of the control room. Kind of keeps the low end from building up too much in the corners. So it's not, and so what I'm not addressing is isolation. You know, these things will not help isolate you from your neighbors. That is very difficult to do in a home environment. You really have to build a room within a room, and that's not going to really happen. So we're not really addressing what your neighbors hear. You know, if you're in an apartment building like I was, you know, my neighbors heard me, and luckily they were Berkeley students and just thought I was practicing. But you know, it's sometimes hard to have a studio, you know, in the city or in a multi-apartment building and things like that. So isolation is definitely a major issue, which we're not addressing today. This is just how to dampen the room you're in, make the room sound good to capture the sound. And hopefully your neighbors are cool with that, or maybe you live in the middle of nowhere and no one can hear you, and that would be great. So here's another, this is the side wall of my control room. And I also built, there's a soffit here. It's called, you know, it's a soffit, which is actually has some panels inside, and that's mainly for bass trapping. So the low end in the room gets trapped up in there with the panels, and it just keeps it's absorbed to the low end. So I'm not having any low end buildup in my room, which helps. And then some people might just put this kind of egg crate kind of cushiony stuff on the walls here and there, and that helps deaden the walls as well. So if you're really stuck and you're in a particular situation where you just can't set up anything permanently for recording, I recommend you just take a mic stand, just a boom stand, you know, kind of make it in a T shape, and then just put a moving blanket or any kind of blanket over it. I mean, the more dense, you know, like a quilt would be good. That's just a moving blanket. and then if you need to, use the little spring clamps to hold things in place, those are $1 a piece. So it's really, very easy. You can set up a couple mic stands on a couple blankets and just, have that set up in kind of like a V shape and sing into it or play into it, and it will do wonders. It's a very affordable way to kind of deaden your recording area without having to, hang things on the walls or move too many things around. So that really works well in a especially if you're like in a living room and you want to kind of tighten the sound of the recording in a slightly larger room. This would definitely work really well. So just a couple mic stands in addition to the mic that you're using to record with. So you want to make sure you have a couple mic stands and extra cables and such. So and that's pretty much it. I just wanted to show you an overview of gear, some of the things that you can do, with whether it's vocals or other instruments. A lot of people are playing acoustic guitar and singing and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of variations to what you may be doing. Being stuck at home and having a little bit of gear can really help to keep your creative juices flowing. Maybe getting some work playing solos for people or collaborating, in addition to, whatever you may be doing with MIDI tracks and programming and stuff. But as far as acoustic recording, there's a lot you can do with just a little bit of tools like that, and just deadening in the room and cross your fingers that you have cool neighbors or cool parents or whatever that don't mind listening to you play all the time now that you're home all the time. So yeah, so that's pretty much what I wanted to show you with that. And I guess I can answer questions or anything that you guys have regarding those techniques.
Tony, thank you so much. That was awesome. I learned so much, and I'm really excited to dive into some of these questions. So we have a bunch of questions. We'll try to get to as many of them as possible. So first up, we have the question, do the audio interface inputs allow simultaneous use of a condenser mic and a guitar simultaneously?
Yep. So if you have a 2-channel interface, you would say, okay, channel 1 is a microphone, channel 2 is line input.
Nice, pretty straightforward. Next question is, do you ever use XY also on vocals?
Good question, but no, I don't. But you know what I do, and it freaks vocalists out. So I don't use that. I mean, not to say it wouldn't work, but I don't use that technique. But that's a great question. But what I do is I'll have my normal condenser mic. I'll have a dynamic mic, like let's say the SM7B. So condenser mic, dynamic mic, side by side. So they're singing into 2 mics that are different kinds. Then I'll have an additional condenser mic about maybe 2 or 3 feet away above the singer. So what I have is I have a condenser, which is picking up very sensitive stuff like the breathing and, just the nuances of the vocalist performance. Then I've got the dynamic mic, which is picking up the just really bare bones information. And then you've got some spatial content with that third mic. Now, I don't use that third mic as much as the first 2, but I'll tell you, ever since I started doing the 3 mic technique on a vocal, I have not been able to take one of the mics off and like it better. So even though I use a little bit of that room mic, as soon as I take that off, I'm like, oh, that's not better. So I might bring it down a little and just use a little bit of it. But that room mic, because we use room mics on drums and we use room mics on other instruments. Why do we not use a room mic on a vocal? So I actually, there's a couple things that I found out about that over the years. I read some interviews with, some of the early Bowie stuff he was doing in Berlin, and it wasn't something they actually were doing on purpose. But a lot of times in those sessions, back in the day where they had lots of mics in a room, they'd have a communication mic set up in the room, and that would be for just the musicians to talk to people in the control room. But then a lot of times they would just leave that mic in record, and as somebody was singing, David Bowie was singing the song, and then they would just be this mic a few feet away. They would capture that, and by using that kind of distant mic, gives you a little bit of options in placing the vocal in this stereo field. So it definitely was something I when I tried it out, I was like, wow, that's really great. And so it's just something, if you're not limited to inputs, it's worth recording more inputs than you used to. I mean, just, and like I said, I've never been able to turn one of those mics off and like it any better. And it just gives you a way to kind of, compress or EQ mics independently. And as a trio, you can really, create you have much more flexibility with shaping the vocal sound than just from a single source. What do I do with this vocal? It's just not working right. It doesn't sound right. It doesn't feel right for space. So multiple mics is something that, based on what we do with drums, I was like, well, let me give it a try on vocals. And I don't do it a lot for clients, but I do it a lot for me, like when I'm doing it, because it does take up more time when you're mixing, because you've got 3 of the same vocal. Every time you do a vocal track, you have 3 tracks. So it tends to, kind of get to be a little bit cumbersome for mixing if it's like a pop song or something, but it's kind of something fun to try. So
Cool. Nice. Okay, next question. Hey, Anthony, what sound panels are you using in your studio? The gray ones.
kind of like the baby blue ones, you mean? The bluish ones? Is that what?
I think so. I think this was
Okay.
in the background of your sort of like DIY baffles photos.
Yeah. Well, these blue panels that we see in the control room are, that was a Home Depot special. That was me buying some stuff, framing it out just with very, like, 1x3 framing and L brackets. And then in the panel, it's about almost, I guess it's 4 inches deep, just regular insulation, the yellow roll insulation that you can get at Home Depot, and then just cover it with fabric. That's just those blue panels are just cotton, fabric I bought in Chinatown years ago. And, I got a bulk, I bought like a bolt of fabric for like $90 because it was on sale or something. And then I just was able to, make all those panels, and I've used them for years, and I probably need to, buy some new ones or make some new ones. But yeah, it's very cost effective to make your own panels with just regular insulation and put fabric around it. You want it to be at least 4 inches thick, 6 inches if you can, because the thicker, 4 inches will do it for high and mid range, but for low end, you want something thicker. So, it's a poor man's bass trap, if you're doing a rehearsal space, is to take a plastic, those rubber garbage cans,
Mhm.
at Home Depot, like the Rubbermaid garbage cans, and just put insulation, that roll insulation, in layers, like, on the bottom, and then a circle around it on above it, and then you just cover it with fabric, kind of, you want to, make sure you, use like bungee cables or something to cover it with fabric so people don't throw garbage in it. But in a rehearsal space, it works really great because it serves as a really, you put that in the corner and it makes a really great bass trap. So, a lot of times when people are rehearsing in a space, that just the low end is just like killing you. So between the bass and the kick drum, it'll actually suck up some of that low end, and it's actually, helpful for your ears a little bit too, because that low end is just sometimes, hard on your eardrum to have that go on for long periods of time. So just stuff like that, you can save a lot of money by just making your own stuff with just regular materials that are absorptive. That's all.
Nice. I love it. DIY. Okay, next question. In regards to doing doubles, triples on vocal takes, is it important to use the same mic on each take, or does it help if you use different mics for different takes?
Well, it'll sound different. I don't know if it'll help, but I kind of eliminate that by recording 3 mics at the same time, because then I can say, okay, on this vocal layer, I'm going to use this mic. On this vocal layer, you don't know until later as to what you're going to use. So, mics have different frequency responses, and, using the same or different mic is going to be slightly different. There's not one way I would recommend, because it depends on what you're trying to do. If you want it to sound the same, then using the same mic. It's mostly the person, though, that sounds the same. So mics are going to change it a little bit for sure, but it's really if you're trying to stack vocals, using multiple people is going to be a better way to get more thickness out of it than just using different mics on one person. So
Nice. Okay. Next question. We got 3 more of these, and then I think we'll call it. So the next question is, I have a Yeti Blue mic, and I'm not sure which setting to use for recording. For instance, if I wanted to record a baby grand piano. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Yeti Blue mics, the USB mics.
I am.
Okay.
My first thing about that would be I would want to record a piano in stereo. So the best setting would be to have 2 mics. But barring that, probably just, the cardioid pattern facing into, if you can, get it into the piano. If it's an upright piano, just open up the top and put it above it. Ideally you want two microphones, if just to get a stereo spread. Another mic for a piano that works really well is a PZM mic, which I didn't cover today. But PZM mics, pressure zone mics, are the ones you see like on the floor of like a theater performance. That it picks up 180 degrees and it's a flat plate. And sometimes what you can do is you can tape that to the inside of the piano on each side, close the piano lid, and then you've got, you can just basically keep it there if you want to buy mics for the piano and always have it at the ready. That's a good mic to use where you can keep the lid closed and still have a stereo recording. So those are a little pricier. They might be, I don't know, maybe they might be 180 bucks each or something, but it's something that you could just tape to the underside of the piano lid and just keep it there if you're a piano player, and just always have the ability to record really quickly.
Nice. Cool. Okay, next question. I have a condenser mic to record vocals. And even though it should show that it peaks visually in the audio track, it feels like it's distorting when I listen back. Any pointers?
Yeah, that could be the way you're monitoring. It's, that's probably, like, a lot of times the interface may be causing that distortion. Maybe there's something wrong with the mic too. I mean, I don't know, but typically if you're using those consumer level interfaces, you're going to not have as much headroom before distortion. So you have to be a little bit careful. Try, it's hard to say whether, if you get a good level and it shouldn't be distorting, it may be that the output is turned up too much, especially if you're listening from the computer. I find that a lot of my students are using their computer, are getting distortion because their computer cannot have as much output gain as an interface. But with an interface, it should be okay. You just want to make sure that you just have to check your gain stages, which is, any place that you can adjust the level. You just need to experiment with that and see what gain stage might be causing the distortion. It could be just the output gain is turned up too much and the headphones can't handle it or the speakers can't handle it. So you just kind of have to do some troubleshooting and find out what step that's happening. Because once you find out, then you can keep it under control.
Nice. Okay, thank you everyone for all of your questions. We've got one more question before we wrap up today's presentation. Sure. Hello. Firstly, thanks for the sharing of your recording experience. I'm building my home basement studio, 600 square feet. What is your suggestion to soundproofing a ceiling and doors? How do you soundproof your studio?
That's a tough one. You basically you need mass. You need like just heavy everything. It's like, you need to build a bomb shelter. That's basically what it is. Like concrete blocks, in a room within a room. So basically, if you're trying to isolate anything in a home environment, you just have to build a room within that room. Wooden construction with isolation between the existing wall. It's kind of like you're building a room within the room without touching the existing walls. That's really much how you have to do it, to do it properly, and it's very costly. Just because you're, a lot of mass, multi-layer drywall, and everything's decoupled from the original construction, and sometimes you buy absorbers to build a new floor off of. So even on a concrete floor, you don't want it to travel anywhere, or you don't want, like the T or something, I can sometimes hear the T, but I don't really feel it. But, if you have like rumblings through your floor, like even concrete or whatever, that's really how you can isolate that. It's a lot of heavy mass, a lot of multi-layerings of sheetrock and then decoupling from the existing construction. That does a pretty decent job.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Tony. This was really
Sure.
great. And thank you everyone who is tuning in today. I just want to remind everyone that this presentation will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Berkeley Alumni. So you can actually head over there and check out some of our other webinars and presentations that we already have up. But if you'd like to rewatch today's presentation, keep an eye on that YouTube channel. Thanks again, Tony. I'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for everybody. Thanks.